Hello and good evening, everyone. I'm Sukaina Hussain Ebrahim from Pakistan, and I'm your moderator for today. Basically, I'm working as an RBT by BCBA and remedial therapist. Along with that, I'm a consultant and a lead teacher trainer at a well-renowned university in Pakistan. Basically, I work with children who learn differently, the unique ones, the hidden gems, let's say. I also believe on including art, Lego, and blocks as a cognitive tools to enhance their learning and especially for the short attention span. If we come to our topic, it's the most needed topic of the day, or let's say of the time. Especially we have seen this after pandemic or during the pandemic when children were most of the time they were at home, so they saw or they observed few behavior or few things which were not supposed to be with them, right? And of course the environment wasn't there, the exposure wasn't there. As a result, what we saw that increasing rate of behavior, just challenging behavior. So keeping all this thing in mind, our today's topic is identifying and responding to the challenging behavior in young children. Why young children? Because the early age is the tender one. So we have to be very careful while we deal with them. You all are related to ECE, so you know this is the most crucial age. So we have to be very like soft and deal with the, let's say, very tactically, so it should not go out of hand. So we believe that if these hidden gems are redirected towards an alternative behavior rather than this one challenging behavior, what if we just alternate the behavior and provide them something which can change the behavior? They can do wonders in this world. So let me introduce of today's presenters. Our esteemed speakers for today are, and they are going to share their expertise which will surely help parents, caregivers, ECE teachers, educators, and I feel all of the audience, regardless of their field. Let me introduce first our first presenter for today. She is Sue Asquith. She is an award-winning international early childhood consultant, author of the celebrated book, Self-Regulation Skills in Young Children. She's a trainer and also delivers conferences, seminars, and keynote speeches, and much more. Not less than that, Sue is also known for her articles, blogs, and projects which she has done and which are basically funded by the Department for Education by UK in UK. So thank you so much. Welcome, Asquith. We welcome you on board with us. And we are actually, I'm really glad to see the presenters from around the world. So it's something really, let's say, overwhelming for me, meeting people from India, people from UK, and I'm from Pakistan. So actually, it's a diverse speaker. Zoom has actually connected us all together on one platform. So thanks to ECDF. Thanks. Our next speaker for today, Archana Madhusudhan. Please let me know if I'm pronouncing it wrong. All right, Archana? She's a
Perfect,
language.
Ms. Ibrahim.
Thank you. She's a language skills specialist. She's in the field of education for more than 2 decades. Amazing. Master trainer for all English-related competitive exams like CELS, IELTS, etc. So it was a long list. Being a certified coach and POXO and neuroscience practitioner is another feather on her hat. We welcome you, Archana, on the board. Thank you so much for being with us. Last but not the least, we have Deepti Bedi. Deepti is a creative and compassionate educator with over 18 years of experience across the IB and CBSE curriculums. Marvelous. Inquiry-based learning and teaching is her passion to establish a secure and diverse setting for learners. That's great, Deepti. I would love to talk more about it. And of course, you are going to share your expertise as well. So if we talk about today, overall, we have 5 basic questions, which we tried our best to cater each and every area and touch our presenters' expertise too. So the 5 questions from all of our speakers, which we are sure going to help the individuals in the field, or if they are not in the field, still the mothers, the parents can be benefited from it. Now, each round will have like nearly 9 minutes. So each speaker can just provide us 3 minutes of something which can build on with our knowledge. Each one of you, please, I would request you to introduce yourself. Ms. Asquith, can you please start?
Absolutely, thank you. Such a pleasure to join everybody today. I know it's kind of afternoon and evening with most of you, but it's still morning, or just gone afternoon actually here in the UK. So it's a delight to join, and as you've just said, it's so lovely to bring early years experts from around the world together, isn't it, on the same platform. So my name's Sue Asquith. I'm here in the UK. As you've already introduced me so eloquently, I am an early childhood consultant doing lots of work here in the UK, working with parents, working with nurseries, kindergartens, and also preschools and schools, and also nannies and childminders here in the UK. Lot of stuff at the moment on behaviour and self-regulation, as well as the normal kind of regulatory kind of questions and training as well, but a lot, and possibly, like you said earlier when you introduced us so well, about the children who maybe have gone through COVID, and we don't know obviously what their experiences have been at home were like there, but we do know, regardless of the experience within the households, that actually they didn't do the socialization that we probably would have done if we didn't have that worldwide pandemic there as well. So I'm also the author of the book called Self-Regulation Skills in Young Children, and I'm writing lots of blogs and lots of training at the moment for different people as well. So lots of diverse things happening here.
All right, thank you so much. Now our next presenter is Miss Archana. Miss Archana, we would like you to introduce yourself in detail, because I just picked up 2 to 3 points, which I think is not enough to introduce yourself. So I would like to have a detailed one, so our audience can get the idea how amazing presenters are there today on the platform. Please.
Thank you, Ms. Ebrahim. A very good evening. Namaskar to everybody. I'm Archana Madhusudhan, like introduced by Ms. Ebrahim, and hello, my co-presenters as well. Not having as many accolades and feathers in my cap as Ms. Sue and Ms. Bedi, but then yes, I'm trying to make a little dent in the education world with my little expertise, is what I can say. So like Ms. Ebrahim said, I have been an educator for the past 2 decades now, but my forte has been higher education. So I've been into training students. In fact, they're all graduates and postgraduates. So, you know, I thought teaching was fun. It was great fun. But I dabbled into early childhood education as early as recently as 2016. And then I realized what teaching actually means. So I understand teaching English for higher grades is my bread and butter, but the jam is in early childhood education. And I fell in love with, you know, how early childhood educators actually are the building blocks. And until and unless they create a strong foundation for us, we struggle at a later stage. So my job was quite simple, you know, until and unless I came into early childhood education and fell in love with what actual teaching is. And like Miss Sue correctly mentioned, the pandemic has wreaked havoc with the social emotional intelligence. And this is one area which has been greatly neglected. I can't say this was the case with the Western world, but yes, if you look at the East, emotional quotient was never a focus. So emotional mental well-being has never been a focus. And it took a bad hit during the pandemic when the youngsters, I think the group of people, the lot which suffered the most was the youngsters, because they were restricted to the four walls of the house, zero social interaction, and expecting them to be socially acceptable individuals when they came out into the world was, is ridiculous, is what I must say. So educators today are facing a great challenge in trying to get a hold of, firstly, how do I handle this? And challenging behaviors, yes, aplenty because of the epigenetics, I must say. And thank you so much, ECDF, for inviting me over here. And Ms. Ibrahim, Ms. Deepti, and Ms. Sue, I hope we are going to add a little value to our listeners today. So thank you so much, Ms. Ibrahim.
All right, now Ms. Deepti, over to you. I would like our last presenter to introduce herself, please.
Thank you so much. I'm absolutely delighted to be here. And, it just gives me immense pleasure to be here and connecting with educators all across the globe. And it looks so good, the sharing of the knowledge that's going to be taking forward. And it's earlier also I've collaborated with a few more. And believe me, I think the immense knowledge that we all have is definitely going to have a great impact on the children that are growing up. So I'll introduce myself. Hi, everybody. I'm Deepti Bedi. I'm someone who's full with energy, I would say. So I'd call myself energetic individual with exuberant energy, who is highly motivated because of my goals. And my goals are my little ones. I've been a preschool teacher and an early years teacher. Have also taught, CBSE curriculum from about grade 1 and 2. And presently, I'm, taking care of and, bringing children into the rhythm of life with my early years forte. And it's an amazing field. I think all this while, the very important thing that I think I've just experienced as an educator is that as an educator, we keep our energy exuberant and happy and lively and also very calming at the same time. We are the ones who can, make these little ones learn, grow, and evolve. And I think in this journey, I've seen children evolving and transforming into a very happy individual. And yes, taking further from Ms. Archana and Ms. Sue, after the pandemic, I think it is the social and emotional learning has become a very important part. And I think so rightly, and we are the ones, lucky ones who are going to be the motivators in their life. And here we are, and as we are going to sail and discuss and share our viewpoints, we will definitely bring upon something great. Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone, for amazing introduction. I'm sure the introduction is so impressive that we all are waiting for something amazing to come up, and they can take the all audience. And I myself is going to take away as like something as a souvenir to deal with my own learners and strugglers or my students and individuals. So it's amazing, which I feel we call it ECD. But I think these tips which you guys are going to mention, I can say this in advance that it can work for even young adults too. Let's hear all of you, and maybe I'm thinking wrong, but I feel that you will come up with something amazing and we can easily connect, because I feel each and everyone has a child inside them. They just need love, right? So maybe you need to increase the portion to bring up the best from inside. Okay, so we are going to follow the same sequence like Miss Asquith, and then we have Miss Archana, and last Miss Deepti, right? So let me start with our first question, and I really want you to give a depth about the question, because this is the major thing, because people take it totally differently. And I feel this is different. If you experts are going to explain us, maybe it can clear many of the misconceptions. The first question, Ms. Asquith, what is the identification of challenging behavior?
Wow, this is a huge, big question, isn't it? A big minefield almost. I think we need to remember, like you've just said, that these young children are still discovering the world around them. And because the world was so closed down during COVID, and for this kind of cohort of children over the last couple of years, their discovery is even more overwhelming or even more exciting than it would have been maybe for previous generations and cohorts as well. They've got lots of emotions to learn about. If you or I, like you've just said, this can be, it can be transparent to any age group. If you or I sat on the call today, all the adults were going to do something totally out of their comfort zone and totally new to you, you'd have these emotions that you might not have felt before, and these anxious feelings that you might not have welcome in your body as well. So we need to really remember that these little children in early childhood have got a lot of emotions, a lot of excitement, maybe a lot of anxiety that builds up. And this is where a lot of those kind of behaviours come out as well, I think. We need to help them, obviously, to think about their emotions and thinking about how to start to understand what they are, rather than trying to lose control of them as well. So there's lots of going on here with behaviour, but I think we do need to remember that when we're seeing these challenging or unwanted behaviours, that the children are communicating something to us. It might be, I'm tired, I'm thirsty, I'm a little bit anxious about this, but they are actually communicating something to us as well. So it's important that we do identify. Obviously, we're observing them, we can maybe see and hear what they are doing, but also to think, why are they doing this? What are they trying to say to me here? Because obviously this could be a safeguarding, child protection issue maybe, for some children. It might be that there's a speech, language and communication need there for some children, so there's a frustration, or maybe they're not understanding English as a second language, if that's an issue or relevant for them as well. There's all sorts of things that it might be. Plus, as you've already identified, the special educational needs, there's children with specific behaviours or specific needs that do really need our extra magic to look at their little gems, as you called them earlier, and really identify what is this for this child and how can I really help them there. Lots of children have sensory needs, and the world's just too overwhelming for them, whether that's through everything that they're looking at or hearing or tasting. But if we're not trained and aware of those things, all we see is a child in meltdown or tantrum, because they're crying because the world's too much for them to be able to take on. So there's lots, I think, it's a huge minefield, isn't it, to think about, why, what is it and what are we doing? But I think that's the big premise of where I'm coming from is, yes, we really need to understand the children. We need to see those behaviours, but then we need to start thinking, wow, what can I do to help this child? And I know we're talking about some of those things later, so I won't go on any further on that question, but we do need to think, the children are exploring at this age group, and they're not yet in control of their emotions and their bodily experiences. So they've got all that overwhelm there, I think, which sometimes causes the behaviours that we're talking about.
That's great. That's really amazing. And as I said, I was thinking it's really in depth and it needed to be like in detail so we can recognize it actually while we are dealing with it. All right, Miss Archana, over to you. What is the identification of challenging behavior?
I think much has been explained by Ms. Sue, but challenging behaviors displayed by young children in the classroom can vary widely depending on their age, developmental stage, individual temperament, and the specific classroom environment. One thing from a neuroscience perspective, what I would like to tell is the prefrontal cortex or the thinking brain starts developing at the age of 7, apparently. So when we are dealing with very young children, especially the early childhood age group, we have a lot to look into. Challenging behaviors like tantrums and meltdowns are very common. Young children might exhibit tantrums and meltdowns when they're frustrated or they're unable to communicate their needs or are experiencing difficulty regarding their emotions. One rip-off of this aggression. We see some children are very aggressive. They indulge in hitting, biting, scratching, or pushing, shoving. Now, this in children can navigate, it can be a conflictive. This is all to express frustration or in another way, seeking attention. This is also called attention-seeking behavior. Also, you see non-compliance. Sometimes we see children refuse to follow instructions or comply with classroom rules, and this can lead to disruptions in learning and activities. Attention-seeking behavior, several reasons for these. Children might engage in these even if they're not bothered, even if it is negative attention. So this could include interrupting, talking out of turn, or disruptive behavior. Some children are defiant. So defiance is another challenging behavior. Children challenge authority figures by openly defying rules, refusing to participate, or even engaging in power struggles. Very little, but then a teacher feels challenged being dominated by a 2.5 or 3-year-old. So obviously this would become a power struggle there. Impulsivity. So we see young children struggle with impulse control. Even we adults sometimes have very little or very difficult to control our emotions in certain situations, although we are fully mature adults and know the etiquette or behavior in society. Now, young children also struggle with impulse control, leading to behaviors like blurting out answers or interrupting conversations or acting without thinking. Another symptom of a challenging behavior, withdrawal or isolation. So we see that some children keep themselves isolated, like they withdraw from social interactions, avoid participation in group activities. Inattentiveness, difficulty staying focused on tasks. Now, this might be because of learning disabilities. They have again. So this is where the role of a special educator comes in. So it's not that something wrong with the child, but then yes, they are struggling with certain issues which need to be handled in a very delicate manner. So we see some children are talking continuously, making noises, engaging in off-topic conversations. All of these disrupt the learning environment. So these are all challenging behavior. Most common behavior that we find is hyperactivity. When some children are very restless, they find it very difficult to sit still. They're always moving. So it's challenging when we are engaged in structured activities. Also, difficulty in sharing, taking turns, and engaging in fights. This is the consequence of all of these. Also, refusal to transition. So when a child is doing a particular activity or a particular routine is being followed, sometimes transitioning into the next activity may be encountered with resistance or tantrums. Some children also struggle with self-care. Activities like using the restroom, washing hands, putting on the jackets, they require help in each and every aspect. One very challenging behavior that today's educators face is negative self-talk. Children might engage in negative self-talk, expressing feelings of inadequacy or frustration about their abilities. Or this can also be termed as another aspect of this is obsessive behavior. They engage in repetitive obsessive behavior such as arranging objects in a specific way can be challenging both the child and the classroom routine. So yes, the list is endless, and I think we can discuss further with regard to what are the specific challenges that we face. So these are the general common things observed in challenging behavior in children.
Miss Archana, just wanted to ask, like you said that lining up the things or material and then meltdowns and all. Being an RBT, I feel most of the symptoms we have observed it in ASD, individual with on spectrum. Is it right? All right, I can come back to my question later. Miss Bedi, please.
Oh, thank you so much. I think both the other members have explained and said very beautifully. I'll just say that, I want to tell you that it's very important before we start talking about identification, that when we come from home to the school or wherever the educational institution we are going to, it's very important to check on ourselves, that are we calm, are we open, are we ready to accept? Because this is for sure that when we are going to the, our educational firm, we will be meeting children, and there will be a group of, let's say, 15 or 20 children with different needs. And I think first I always check on myself, in terms of my emotions, that I'm calm, which plays a very important role. And of course, the calming way that one would start a class would be, as we go on to the identification, I think the first thing is this, because since I have taught also the, I would say the early years, probably age between 3 to 8, it's really important to understand that, even with 7 to 8 or 5 to 7, there's a remarkable difference. So as Miss Archana, said in the beginning, that it is the child's age, it is the developmental age that matters, right? And also it matters that what is the individual characteristic, and from that combination, I think there is one mnemonics. If we all know what is mnemonics is, like sometimes we make mnemonics the first letter of, certain observable things that we pick up. Like there are 3 things that are on my mind when I want to check on, behavior, and I want to identify if I have to go back to the child and check on to the child's behavior. Is first is O, then is F, then it is C. The O is the observable behavior, the behavior that I observe, whether the child is hitting, biting, screaming, as Ms. Archana just explained how it is, the child is withdrawing. Once I have made a note of this, that the observations have been made, my O is done. Now I see what is the frequency. Do I really need to go back? If the frequency is higher, I definitely need to find out, and make a note of, which is a very important part of while we are observing children. And then I want to find out the C part, the context or what triggers it. So one, I have my observation. Second is about the frequency, how frequently all of that is happening. And also the context or what triggers it. And once I have the combination of all of this, I begin to make some of my documentation. And also parallelly, I'm also working that how I can calm it down. If it is calming down and it's growing, going towards calming, it works wonder. If it is not, then I need to start making more records in terms of, I need to know the child more, the developmental time, age, birth, some more needs, probably to give in the right, appropriate help to the child and to, make the surrounding more stronger. So I'll go by that. It's very important. Once we identify strongly, then I think we can start working on our documentations of noting down that what triggers it and how we can make a point about it. Yes.
Thank you so much. This is what my thoughts are. I mean, I felt that you just spoke my heart. True, Miss Bedi. So if I'm going towards second question, I'm just wondering that it seems like I have combined both of the question in one question. But let's see, I'm sure my experts must have something more to share with us. If you feel it's identical or similar, still fine. I'm sure I can get, our audience can get something more from you. So let's dig further. Question number 2. What are some challenging behaviors in young children? Now, after hearing you all, I feel that it's the similar question, but still, I would like you all to just say a few points about it. Again, Miss Asquith, over to you.
No problem. So yeah, I think we have kind of had that crossover, haven't we? But depending on the age of the children, I mean, this can be babies, it can be toddlers, it can be preschool children, or as you said earlier, it comes some of the older children in school, or actually some adults maybe sometimes. There are obviously there's crying, hitting, shouting, throwing, biting, might be somebody trying to pull somebody's hair, It might be swearing or using some inappropriate words, defiance when asked to do something. I can't remember who it was earlier, but I think it might have been Archana maybe that talked about hyperactivity. I think sometimes it's easy to say that children are hyperactive and they kind of get that label, but I think naturally some children are more active than other children, and depending on their environments in their classrooms, if they're wanting some of that physical input, that sensory input for physicality, but it's sitting down to listen time, then they're quite quickly sometimes labelled as these hyperactive children, when actually everything in their body is pulsing to move. And little children obviously aren't programmed to sit still, but yet in a classroom environment, sometimes the expectations are to sit and listen to the teacher for a period of time as well. So I think some children, whereas hyperactivity is obviously something to be aware of, but I think a lot of children maybe inappropriately get labelled as hyperactive just because their learning style maybe is different to somebody else's learning style. Somebody also spoke about sharing earlier, and we know that sharing is a tricky situation. Sharing isn't easy for children, and it certainly isn't something that 2-year-olds understand the need to do either. So it's kind of, again, it's that modelling, supporting, encouraging the children to share, and taking turns is tricky up until 7 and 8 and 9 and 10 years old. If you've ever left the older children playing a board game with maybe a dice in a shaker and they're moving their counter on, you can guarantee the moment you're not looking, there's massive arguments about whose turn it was and somebody's done it wrong and somebody's cheated and the dice is on the floor or something's happened. So we know that sharing and turn taking are something that we can model, we can help children with, but they're certainly not skills that we're born with, are they? It's a tricky one, that one, to try and encourage and model and support children with those as well. I think again it was Archana who talked about earlier maybe some kind of what I would call schema or schema play or scheme, where children might be learning in such a way, lining things up or collecting things or throwing things all the time. And that's something that I think we also need to be aware of, especially in early childhood, that there will be those styles of play which, yes, might go on to be a fixed style. It might be a fascination that might maybe be related to a special educational need, such as autism, as you mentioned earlier, maybe. But all children, if not most children, will go through the schema play when they're small, and it's not a special educational need. It's a part of who they are and their learning style. But obviously, if it doesn't go away and it carries on, then it can maybe be part of something, for example, autism, that might be a specific fascination, a specific thing that they have to do. Tantrums and meltdowns, I think parents are very, very embarrassed about their children's behaviour. There was some research in the UK, in fact, actually, it was international research from the Royal Foundation in the UK, but the research came from international families and educators to say that actually parents feel most embarrassed and challenged about their children's behaviour, regardless of whether their child has a tantrum in a school or a nursery situation, whether they're out in public at a park or at the supermarket or in a restaurant, or even if they're at home, especially when they live intergenerationally maybe. There are all sorts of feelings that parents go through when their children are in a tantrum or a meltdown, because they feel very embarrassed about it. And internationally, I'm doing a lot of talks on supporting parents to understand that actually it's quite normal for a small child to at some stage have a meltdown or a tantrum in public or in private. And actually, if they didn't, maybe we'd start to worry about them, because actually everybody does it at that age. And not to be too embarrassed about it. but obviously cultural wise, that differs throughout the world, and parents feel very embarrassed sometimes about how to contain that rather than maybe support it. The prefrontal cortex obviously was mentioned earlier, but it's that kind of understanding the brain development, and it will crash, and they will result in some kind of trauma, tantrum, or a meltdown at some stage. It's understanding again why, and being able to support that child, because it's a hugely powerful thing, isn't it, when you've had such a huge meltdown or tantrum. They need your help to understand, wow, that was really, really powerful, wasn't it? I wonder why you were so sad about that, or wonder why you were so cross about that, or whatever it is that maybe has happened there as well. Disruptions sometimes during transitions, and again, unexpected things. If children are playing out and they're having such a wonderful time, and then suddenly they've got to come inside, I think as adults sometimes we'll be a little bit miffed or upset about somebody stopping us from doing something that we really like to go and do something that we don't want to do. So I think again, it's about having that understanding with children with transitions. Or some children might be worried about what is going to happen next. Okay, you told me to stop this, but I'm not really sure about what's happening next. Or if they don't understand language particularly well, and they have to go and listen to a story or a teacher time, then they're going to find that annoying or frustrating, because obviously they're going to go on to do something next that they don't understand what to do as well. So there's lots of things, I think, here, again, really about the types of challenging behaviour and what we do with that. And also I made a note to think about earlier, what is challenging behaviour? Because what might challenge me might not challenge you. And we've all got little things maybe that do maybe press our buttons maybe more than another adult as well. So when we're thinking about behaviours, I don't tend to use the word challenging behaviours. It could be behaviours that challenge, or maybe just behaviours, and we just need to understand that child, the specific unique child, and why they're behaving like that, so that we can then put that into context and do the support, as Deepti was saying earlier. It's about that process, isn't it? It's about the observation, the understanding, and putting it in context and providing that support.
Thank you so much, Ms. Asquith. And one more thing, you talked about tantrums. So I would say, like, while studying, I came across this word terrible twos, right? So this is the specific age from 18 months and so on. I think it ends somewhere at 4 years of age. At that period, also the parents or the, let's say the people or the caregiver, they just observe this thing like meltdowns, tantrums. So of course, we should not every time take it to some kind of like differently able, a child is like struggling somewhere, a behavior issue. This is part of that transition as well. Am I right, ma'am?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, it's about their brain getting used to those emotions. It's yes, definitely very definitely age. I don't want to say age and stage appropriate, because obviously people don't find the tantrums appropriate, but it's certainly a stage that children go through in early childhood. And I know we've been using the words tantrum and meltdown interchangeably just now, but I would say a tantrum's almost like a willful, the child trying to get their own way, and maybe having that power struggle with an adult, maybe trying to be manipulative over having the sweets or chocolate or what have you, or not wanting to tidy their toys away or something like that. Whereas a meltdown, I would say, is complete overwhelm of the body. So that if it was a sensory need, for example, and there was too much noise or anything like that, that's where the brain actually takes over and closes down and puts you into fight and flight mode. And that's the thing. I think it's different to think about what is a tantrum and what is a meltdown. But I could literally talk about that for hours in terms of brain development and what's happening there. But definitely terrible twos or terrific twos, if you want to talk about them as being, those gems, like you said earlier. Maybe, it is a phase. there's so much going on in their little bodies at that stage. They've realised they're not part of the adult and that they've got their own opinions, their own sense of self, but they don't quite have the communication and language yet to understand what's going on, and they don't yet understand what's going on in their bodies for them at 2 either. So they just get all these feelings, all these big whoosh of feelings, and they can't articulate them. They can't describe whether they're feeling cross or excited or anxious or nervous. They just get this feeling in their body, and they obviously don't know what to do about it. And they don't like to be thwarted at that age, or they don't like somebody telling them no. The no word is like, oh no, and they have these big things, don't they? If they want to do something that's contrary to what you're wanting them to do, then that's obviously sometimes when some of the traumas might start for them as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Miss. And now, Miss Archana, over to you. And thank you so much for giving us the alternative words.
Indeed, Miss Sue. So a little consternation, I guess, Miss Sue. It was not to agitate you, but then the bookish definition of challenging behavior. These are the terminologies used. And I completely agree with you when you say that, we cannot expect a child to be well behaved. Of course, it's part of the growing up routine. A child would know how to manage his emotions slowly as he grows up, but not definitely at that tender age. And the issue in the classroom scenario is you have set routines, and an educator finds it very challenging to accommodate all of the routines and finish with the syllabus when she has a challenging behavior which he or she encounters. And that is where these terms like hyperactivity, tantrum throwing, and then attention seeking, attention grabbing, all of these occur. But I completely corroborate your views, Ms. Sue. These have to be, need to have a different perception as to if the child is really overwhelmed with emotions and he doesn't have the requisite vocabulary to express himself, nor does he know how to control his emotions, these are bound to happen. So thank you so much for giving us those alternate terminologies and explanation. I really appreciate it. Talking about some challenging behaviors in young children, yes, that was a paraphrasing of the original question, but again, I have put a little different perspective around here. So let's take, if we take children and group them together by age, let's say 32-month-old, 33-month-old, 34-month-old, or let's take it all the way up to 18-year-old. And then watch them interact, coding their behavior for kicking, biting, fighting, property theft. We see all of these. What the finding is that 2-year-olds are by far the most aggressive of the lot. That's pretty interesting, isn't it? But we might think, well, children are naturally peaceful, and if they're aggressive, it's because they learned it. It's like, no. That's true for a small majority of children, but there's a substantial number of children who are aggressive by nature. Most of them, unfortunately, are male. Okay, now that doesn't mean most of the children are like that, because not everybody is like that. Even if you look at the 2-year-olds who are most aggressive human beings, some of them, like I told, are male. So let's identify this cohort of aggressive 2-year-olds and track them over time. Track them until they're 4 years old. What we find is that the vast majority of hyper-aggressive male 2-year-olds get socialized quite well. By the time they're 4, they are temperamental, still a little aggressive, but they've become civilized little monsters, so that other people can tolerate them. This means they've had parents, peers, or teachers that enable them to learn how to interact productively with other kids and bring their aggressive nature under control. So there are different behaviors, we see defense mechanisms. Now, these are unconscious psychological strategies that individuals use to cope with anxiety and protect themselves from emotional discomfort. Now, in challenging behaviors in young children might arise as a result of these defense mechanisms. For example, the term tantrums or aggressive behavior might serve as ways for children to release built up emotional tension. Also, anxiety and ego, the importance of ego, which is responsible for mediating between the demands of the, how do I term it, instinctual drives and the superego, that's internalized moral values. The challenging behaviors could emerge when a child's ego struggles to manage conflicts between these internal forces, leading to anxiety and maladaptive behaviors. Also, regression. Children revert to behaviors and emotions they had previously outgrown, such as thumb sucking, bedwetting as a response to stress, change, or other challenging situations. There are also unconscious processes. Challenging behaviors might result from unconscious conflicts, fears, desires that children are unable to express directly. So it becomes, in fact, these challenging, it's not only challenging behavior for children, it is very challenging for educators also. And until and unless one actually understands the emotional needs of the child, it becomes very difficult to handle any of these in the class and get to the level where you have an emotional connect with the child, so the child is able to respond well to you.
Thank you so much, Miss Archana. So here was the view from the neuroscience, right? So that was the other side, right? Thank you so much. And I would like to go back once we are done and listen the whole thing. It's really amazing. But of course, if I concentrate over here, I'm going to miss this. So Miss Bedi, now over to you. The same question.
I think, some of we already know it, just diving into it, and I think we're dwelling more into it. It's beautiful to hear from Miss Sue and Miss Archana. And I want to tell you that, I'm taking up my probably examples are, because I'm dealing with them every day. I think the very first way that I would say that I can just find out if there is some challenging behavior is moment they begins to play. If their play is disruptive play, if their play is an aggressive play, or if I would say that if they're isolating themselves during the play and everybody else is playing and they like to isolate or probably play, they are a solitary player, and also, refusal to share. I think immediately it just because like the way, like we all are adults and we can conversate and probably, get those vibes from each other who, how about the sharing and all that. I think the first thing that we do is we put the children together, bring into the rhythm, they begin to play, and moment they begin to play, we come to know about it, that how the play is looking like and feeling like with them. Right? I mean, they're into play, or probably some of them have begun to share quickly, but some of them, you find out with a challenging behavior, they are disruptive or they're aggressive, or they might like to isolate, and the refusal to share. Another aspect that I feel very strongly that, you can find out about the challenging behavior is about their eating habits, right? So I would, say that there are some children who are picky eater. That is one part. But there is another one who have a feeding issue. They don't like to eat only anything. And it's like barely few grains would go inside them, That's the time we figured it out that, how that's one of the challenging behavior. As for me, there's a difference between a picky eater and a severe feeding issue. The last one that I feel, because I've seen in one or two children, is a self-harm. If the child has begun to do something like a self-harm, definitely there is some impact, some emotional challenge, or maybe we have to find out what kind of challenge it is definitely going on. So these three things are finding out, because before initially I would find that some of the children would not talk to you for a while, just to bring in those comfort. I'm talking about the early years, starting from 3 years till about 7. It's only when you see them begin to play with their friends, and as an educator, I go and join them. That's the time I find out their emotional needs and what they like and don't like. Thank you.
Thank you so much. So I think it's time to move forward to my third question. Thank you for your input. It was like, I'm really telling you, I'm totally involved. So keep on pinching me that it's your turn to talk. And it's the first time, honestly, when I'm avoiding talking and just want to listen to you. So now, third question is, what support do you provide? If I talk about like any environment you are there, let's say maybe if your classroom setting or any home setting. So what kind of a support do you provide to the individual to alternate their behaviors, right? So how you're going to remove that behavior which cannot be handled by few people and few people can handle it, right? So what are your alternate behaviors for that? What support?
Okay, I think I started to mention earlier that it's finding out why the children are behaving this way, because that's their form of communication. Something in their body doesn't feel right, they feel angry, they feel that something's unfair, they might be feeling hungry or tired or whatever it is. And they will show you this by having a tantrum or a meltdown. They might start to cry or to shout, whatever it is. The behaviours that we are seeing possibly are a result of an unmet need at some stage. So getting to find that Deepti just said, getting to find out exactly why the children are behaving like that, getting to know the individual child and try and find out what makes them tick and how they are emotionally is really, really important. To pick up on some of the things that we kind of briefly mentioned earlier, we know that boys and girls learn totally differently. I know that we talk about equality nowadays and treating everybody so that they've got the same opportunities to learn and things like that, but I think we've still got to remember that the male and female brain are different beasts, and we need to remember that a lot of our early childhood educators and teachers throughout the world are female, and they may then find what the little boys are doing quite challenging or quite bizarre, or why can't you just sit down and come and do this with me like the girls? But actually we need to remember that they've got different needs and we need to remember what kind of things they need from us as well. So sometimes we see their play and that might be classed as inappropriate or aggressive, but actually they've got more physicality, they spend more time bulking up those white muscles and those big muscles. So us asking them to sit down to join in with a story time that is not interactive and doesn't engage them, then they are going to feel really bored with it, and then obviously their behavior might start to slip because they haven't got the self-regulation skills. So we've got a big circle going round and round, haven't we, here for some of our children, not just the boys, the girls as well. But I think especially in the UK, maybe we've kind of come away from saying offering courses like how do boys learn, because we want to be equality and not treat them differently. But actually sometimes we have to treat people slightly differently to treat them equally, or to understand their individual needs, to make sure what we're offering is equal for everybody to learn as well. And again, I said earlier that I'm doing a lot of training and talks with parents and educators in the UK about behaviour and self-regulation and brain development. But the last couple of years, I've also been asked again for the how do boys learn training, or I now call it boys and girls learn differently, so that we're not saying that we have to do things totally different for boys, but to understand that actually to learn, for the outcomes to be the same, the learning curve, the way that the individual children might learn may be different, and try to stop seeing children's learning styles as challenging or behaviour issues, but understanding that actually that's the way that they do learn. So, for example, a boy might, and girls, some of them, might decide that a fist bump or a high five is something that's kind of connecting with people. It's like an attachment. It's about the social side of things. But then some of the children might then like a little bit of a what do you call it, a little play fight maybe, but they're not wanting to hurt their friends. It's just physical, it's a physical connection. It's the way that they want to do it. But to females, or to most females, it's like, what are you doing? Stop doing that. But actually, you know, they do need that time sometimes to be like that, so that they can obviously learn and develop in their own ways. It's just that a lot of our educators are females and maybe haven't understood the male brain. I think it's tricky because we can't just take our brain out and pop in a male one for a moment to find out what's going on. But I think it's important that we do understand that our boys and girls are going to learn slightly differently. They might learn the same things, but in different ways. So just trying to remember that as well. I think attention seeking has been mentioned a couple of times today as well. And yes, we do get to see a lot of attention seeking behaviours. But in terms of child protection and also self-regulation training, I started to try and, for some children, to think about this as being a connection, attention connection, because some children have learned that the only way to get any attention is to behave inappropriately, challengingly, whatever, to do things that they know maybe will push buttons, because that's the only time that they might get some connection or some attention. So if we try and think about attention seeking, but then call it attention connection, and I think sometimes we start to view that differently then, because actually they are really needing somebody's TLC, somebody's attention, and trying to show them that actually they don't need to behave in a certain way to get that they can actually have that connection and that time with you all the time as well. So I think there's lots of different ways of looking at things as well. But there's a lot of different ways culturally and different theorists obviously that have been shared throughout the world, and it's obviously not everybody's kind of using the same theorist, I suppose, nowadays, but really trying to remember the bigger picture, I suppose, around it as well. So the support that I'm given at the moment is more to the adults, it's more to the parents, to the educators, to the teachers, to try and get them to understand the unique needs of children, thinking about their curriculum and what they offer, to make sure it's not all boring sat down stuff, so that children are involved and that there is time for them to be physical in that way as well. And then just trying to get them to understand the ways that children communicate, so that we're not always dealing with that behaviour, but we're understanding it before it might escalate into some kind of behaviour.
All right. Thank you so much. I would just like to add that our audience has some questions, right, queries, and I said maybe we can answer them later in the chat box.
Yeah,
all right.
Yeah.
While we can just add on, because we are running short of time.
Okay.
So let's go forward with our second presenter, Ms. Archana.
Thank you, Ms. Sue, again. Beautifully described. I just love the way you use terminology. I guess we all should adopt using those. Seeking attention to seeking connection. Isn't that beautiful? And I think as educators, as parents, we would understand our children a lot better when we change the terminology, use of terminology. And thank you so much. I really loved the way you expressed. And yes, the male brain, female brain, that's a whole complete different topic of discussion, and a very interesting one at that. We are not on that. Let's come back to the topic of how can we support children with challenging behavior. Like Ms. Bedi said, play therapy. Play is a natural mode of expression for children, and observing their play behaviors could provide insights into their emotions, thoughts, and challenges. Through play therapy, challenging behaviors could be explored and understood in a safe and non-threatening context. So defense mechanisms in play are reflected in a child's play. So observing these, the play behavior can help uncover underlying emotional struggles that might be contributing to these challenging behaviors as we quote them. Another thing is encourage children to communicate emotions. It's very important to understand how children communicate their emotions and conflicts. Like Ms. Sue mentioned, they have their own language of communicating. We adults find it a challenge to understand that and label it as challenging behavior. So now this challenging behavior might serve as a form of communication, indicating that a child is struggling to express his or her feelings or needs in more adaptive ways. So I think it's important to approach these behaviors with empathy and understanding. Many behaviors stem from developmental stages, communication difficulties, emotional struggles, or other underlying factors. By addressing these behaviors with a proactive, supporting approach, like positive behavior support plans, clear and consistent expectations, visual aids, social skills training, emotional regulation techniques, there are several ways in which we can create a positive classroom environment that promotes growth, learning, and healthy social interactions. We need to remember that providing support is a collaborative effort, which involves teachers, parents, specialists, and the child. The goal is to help children develop appropriate skills, cope with challenges, and thrive in both the classroom and their broader lives. So I just summarized everything, Ms. Ibrahim, because we are running short of time. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. And now over to you, Ms. Bedi.
Yeah, thank you so much. I'll again come to my strategic way. What works is that, as I said in the beginning, it's really important and, as an educator to be mindful of our words because they have a really huge impact on children. And I think every day I remind myself that I am a teacher, I'm an educator who is here to, make the children and also myself along with them, to learn and evolve, transform and evolve, which is a very important part. Once I give a reminder to myself every day like this, I think, I model a very positive behavior with my children, with my students, and as well as with my colleagues around, which is reflective every time, if there is some, they walk in or there is some, walkway or anyways we're meeting and we wish each other, which really models a very positive behavior. So I'd say it's important to be mindful. It's important to model a correct behavior, not only with students, but also with your colleagues around. It's really important that in the class, we should have some visual schedule, like the way, we have a visual schedule in the class, which talks about, so like since, I have approximately around 8 to 10 cards, which are placed in order and, they know, and with an arrow, which says that it's going to be a morning breakfast time. Then we have a washroom time. Then we have a unit of inquiry class or a math class, followed by the next class, which is, let's say, a dance class. So a symbol of a dance is there. It's really important for children, whoever are coming in, to have a clear way of what we are going to do. Like today, when we all have come here, we knew it so clearly that what are we going to discuss, what are we going to be sharing, and the best practices that we'll be bringing in. In the same way, when the children come in the morning, they really look up to us. So it's really important for us to have some visual schedule in the class and a positive behavior. And lastly, among all the engagements that are planned during the day for our children, it is really important for them to have their own choice. It should not be that they just have to come and do this because, yes, of course, we have the curriculum to run to. But it's really important that what would you like to do? There should be some space to be well managed in such a way that we would know that, what would you like to do? So what do you think, would you like to be, or would you be doing right after this? Yeah. It's okay, I think I want to make a cup of tea. So why not? Okay, let's go and make a cup of tea together. I would also join you. I think this feeling definitely has a very beautiful impact on children. And lastly, which I think is definitely a strong impact, is stories. Whether I make stories by talking about my childhood, like I would say that, even sometimes I would also feel like crying, before going to school. But once I'm in school, I begin to interact with my friends. My teacher would tell me that today is going to be such a great day. You'll be going for a dance class. I would know, and it would just calm down my future anxiety of the next few minutes or probably another hour. So I would say stories, whether they are made up or whether they are from the books, and they definitely have a huge impact. Thank you.
The spontaneous stories are the amazing ones, especially they can relate their teachers' life, childhood. They are like, oh, what do you think if I just change the sequence? Miss Archana, are you ready for the fourth question?
Of course.
Ready? Okay. Share any of the scenarios from your own classroom or relevant environment where you managed to handle the situation successfully. The situation which seemed out of control to you, but you managed it successfully. Would love to hear you, Ms. Archana.
Okay, success. I really can't say if it was successful. I might feel it was successful, but talking from a child's perspective, I really don't know what the child felt about the scenario. Yes, there was this instance wherein I wouldn't like to name the child. So a preschooler, a 4-year-old, refused to share toys during playtime. And like Miss Sue mentioned, sharing is something which, you gain as this is a quality, or you start knowing that you need to share, or you're even open to sharing as you grow. At that very young age, you're very possessive about your things. So there was this child who refused to share her building blocks. So this was a designated play area. We had a designated play area wherein there were various toys and activities, and she was playing with a set of building blocks. So she was very excited, colorful blocks, building a lovely tower. Another child approached her and expressed interest in playing with the blocks as well. So like we know, some children are not very open to sharing. So she blankly refused, saying, "These are mine." So the other child, not very aggressive, looked very disappointed and walked away. But then it was very evident that, he was very disappointed. So this child, she was least bothered about the other one. She continued building her tower, not paying any attention to whatever was happening around her. There might be several reasons of why she must have done that. She might be experiencing a fear of losing control over her possession, or obviously understand the concept of sharing, taking turns, a very challenging thing for a child that young. Or she might have been feeling very possessive and attached to the blocks. Maybe that was a source of comfort to her. So I approached her very calmly, like Miss Bedi said, being very calm is a quality of a good educator. And I guess I have a little of that. Approach the child very calmly, acknowledge Emily's feelings, or acknowledge her feelings by, telling her that I see that you're really enjoying building with these blocks. So she just looked at me very blankly. And I tried to model the behavior by asking, how would we build something together? And then praised her when she allowed me to join her in building the block. She started sharing. Slowly, I engaged her in discussion about how was she feeling about sharing, and how can we ensure that all of us have fun together, right? So yes, it was slightly challenging, but she agreed to play with me. So as we progressed, slowly she bonded, and she understood that, yes, it would be wonderful having others also play with me. So yes, over time, with consistent support and guidance, or I can say the outcome was quite positive, with cooperative play and social interactions. So this a positive environment created, and not criticizing. Generally, we see, we try to reprimand the child, saying that you shouldn't do that. Why can't you share? So when we ask this, the child becomes more possessive. So I think giving the child some amount of control, at the same time, asking her to include the others also in her play. And, this scenario actually helped. So this slight intervention, not a very huge thing, but it definitely helped solve the issue there and there.
All right. So since I'm going according to my screen, so Miss Bedi, it's your turn now.
Oh, thank you so much. So I think I'll have many examples and examples to share with. But there is one very simple one that I would say happened very recently because we started with the session. There were children, I mean, they were playing, there were some who were disruptive, there were some who were aggressive, and how, we were calming them down and trying to bring all the children in one rhythm of, sharing and caring and listening. So there was this one child who just refused to sit during the circle time, and would not even share much things, would always be in some or the other, just probably fidgeting around with things. So I think there was this one calming strategy that really worked was a pat on a back, a gentle one, which really worked while I was holding his hand. And I was saying that, I really like you. And I have a very interesting story to share. What if you and me sit together and we share it with our friends? It really worked while I was holding his hand, and in between the story, as I said, to be taking up a story is one of my important and very, from my heart. We was sharing the story and I was holding the child's hand for some time, but of course, but genuinely the child's hand was somewhere on my arm, so I told him that it feels nice. I feel nice when you keep your hand on me, right? And I think that touch, that warmth that we both were sharing, and as well the story was going on. In between the story, I could just feel it that he's about to move. And that is the time I told him, I said, what about if you go and give a high five to everyone and, just probably to get everybody's attention also back and also to involve him. I think that strategy really worked. I think bringing children close to yourself and communicating with them and probably just giving that pat on the back and telling that I'm there for you, it just works wonder. I'll have many more, but yes, this is one of it. And also further, I think I've won his heart. Like I tell my parents that my initial first month while I'm settling the children into the routines and systems of the class, I want to win their heart. And once I've won their heart, I think I don't want to talk about academics. I don't want to talk about, I think I just want to win their heart. And so do I want them to love me, that when they wake up, they say that, oh, wow, today's Sunday. When are we going to meet Miss Deepti? So I think this 1 month was a roller coaster ride, because as you just started with the session, and believe me, I can say by now and that, yes, I have won almost everybody's heart. Still one or two are left. But yes. Yeah.
By the way, you are winning our hearts too. That's amazing. It's actually beautiful. I think we should have separate session for each of you. I mean, with each of you. That would be amazing. Coming back to you, Miss Asquith.
I don't think I've got any particular gems. I think I shared them earlier, and obviously we're running out of time. I wondered whether you wanted to maybe ask some of those questions maybe with the last few minutes.
No, I have fifth question as well, right?
Okay.
But later you can answer the queries in the chat box. I mean, on the screen where the page, FB page of ECDF. Is it? Because we have one more question.
Okay.
So do you have a successful situation?
I think maybe just my successful situations nowadays are with the practitioners. I said earlier about obviously training and supporting parents and practitioners to see past that behaviour. And a lot of people will say, the children are behaving in such a way, and there doesn't seem to be any reason why they're doing that. And actually, when you go sit with them and you observe the children, you can usually maybe shine a light on a reason, really. It's a lot of years now since I actually taught the children. There's probably a few maybe really, really old scenarios that I could maybe talk about, but they are mostly to do with children with additional needs, maybe such as autism, where they had sensory processing difficulties in very, very specific things. But I think nowadays, my talks, my support's all about trying to get people to understand about self-regulation and emotions. And I think the other two colleagues have given really, really nice ideas about how they can support, and they've been really, really relevant.
All right. Thank you so much, Miss Asquith. I'm waiting for Deepti, but by the time we can start with Archana as well. Archana, my last question is, any tips or strategies, suggestions for our audience as a takeaway, something as a souvenir so they can take away at home, though we already discussed so many things, but I just want one liner strategy or a line which can be practically used it while in dealing with the different scenarios.
I
Can we
think
have it?
it can be a one word, Ms. Ibrahim,
Okay.
empathy.
Yeah, sure.
Empathy, right? I would like to quote Dalai Lama here. Modern education is premised strongly on materialistic values. It is vital that when educating our children's brains, that we do not neglect to educate their hearts, a key element of which has to be the nurturing of our compassionate nature. So I think if we have that empathy, things will be a lot easier, Ms. Ibrahim.
Very true, very true. Okay, Ms. Asquith, over to you.
Yeah, I think
I
you're
would
very right
really
there.
love
I think,
something.
yeah, I think empathy is really, really important, and also acknowledging children. So when they have had that huge emotional trauma of a meltdown, to just clarify and acknowledge that actually that was a really powerful thing. And you might be able to help them to understand what that powerful thing was, that they were really sad or they were really cross, and help them with that emotional literacy to build up those words to describe their feelings. I think acknowledging is really, really important. There was a little boy in the hairdressers. I was in the hairdressers a couple of days ago, and he was only really, really small, was having his hair cut. But you know, when they get the shaver out to do the grade 2 or grade 3 at the back of a boy's hair, and obviously it vibrates, and this little boy was like, I don't know what that sound is. And the hairdresser was trying to kind of just put it on his arms and make it really, you know, to understand that it's not going to hurt him. And he was crying and crying, and they were trying to get him to sit still, and this child was shuffling about on his mummy's knee. And I just said, wow, you're so sad. And he looked at me and he was really stunned, and I started talking to him, and then he said to be okay as he was calming down then for the hairdresser to actually to do his hair. So I think that kind of empowering and acknowledging feelings rather than just say, it's okay, sit still, sit still. I was going, wow, you look really sad. And just, even though it was too small really to understand what I was saying, I think the way that I was maybe just trying to reassure and acknowledge that he was not feeling regulated, he was a bit scared maybe of the noise, that it really helped him in that situation. So I think that as Archana just said about the understanding emotional and obviously being empathetic is really, really important. And as Deepti said earlier as well about that love, that emotional connection is so important for early childhood, because if you've got the emotional connection, then maybe they can go on to obviously being able to support the learning there as well.
So much. I think maybe this Ms. Bedi has lost a connection. So there are a few questions. If I can take it quickly, are you all okay?
Yeah, that's fine.
Is it okay with you all? Preeti,
Yes.
Anand is asking, yes, Preeti is asking that how do you suggest taking care of challenging behavior of children with parents' involvement?
Do you want me to go first?
How do you suggest taking care of challenging behavior of child with parents by involving parents in them? Because see, it's a triangle. We need to work with parents here.
Absolutely. And this is where I'm doing a lot of work at the moment as well, with trying to explain to parents about how child development affects behaviour, and also about brain development and what happens when we're seeing this behaviour. As a school or a nursery, it's important to work with parents, because expectations of how their children should behave will change maybe from parent to parent as well. And to work together So if you explain your expectations, that sometimes children need to stop doing something, for example, to start a class doing something else. If you explain the importance of that to a parent, just for example, they might be able to back that up at home with some routines. So maybe at a certain time, a child might have to help them to tidy up before they have a meal or something, so that they are also doing the same thing or taking a similar approach. Because if a child doesn't get the same, if the same expectations and the same rules don't apply at home and in childcare or in school, then they're going to maybe not understand why they need to do something a certain way. So that partnership with parents is really important, getting them involved, getting them on board, and maybe sharing some of your expectations and rules, what you'd expect children to be able to do, or the support that you're going to give them so that they can do that, so in hope that the parents will also back that up at home too.
Thank you so much, Ms. Asquith, and thank you so much, Ms. Bedi. I think she lost her connection. Ms. Archana, thank you so much for your presence. And I'm sure you all would love to go back to the page and listen to your own strategies and the talk. It's really amazing, though time was supposed to be for 1 hour, but we spent 1 hour and 20 minutes. It shows that how interesting the topic was, that we all were engrossed and involved. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a nice weekend.
Thank you.
Goodbye.